What is up, fam? Zach Beck here from Path to Self Wellness Center. I want to thank you guys for stopping by. This is where all the magic happens. We have our boxing group training. We have our functional strength training classes, yoga, personal training, physical therapy services. But most importantly, tune into Path to Self podcast for all the raw truth. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into Path to Self podcast. Super excited to have our first guest, Marta O'Donnell, today. We're going over all things health and wellness. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and always remember, face yourself to free yourself. What is up, fam? I'm your host, Zach Beck, and welcome to Path to Self podcast, where we do more unlearning than we do learning. Join me while we dismantle conditioned beliefs and illusions that keep us sick, profitable, and stuck, while we provide a more empowering, holistic, and root cause approach to health and wellness. Welcome to episode number 4 of our podcast. I'm super excited to have our first guest, Marta O'Donnell.
You got it right.
Marta is a holistic health coach who graduated from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. She is local and has now joined our community. She's been training here for the last few weeks. We're super grateful to have her. Welcome, Marta.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Excited to get into it.
Awesome. So we're gonna jump right into it. So super excited to be able to promote a reset, a wellness summer reset that Marta is sending off on June 3rd.
Yep.
It's a 3-week course.
Yes.
It's a summer wellness reset. So we wanted to be able to bring her on and kind of, get a little bit about what's led her to where she is now and what the course includes. And we're pretty like-minded, so I was super excited to dive into some things about diet, nutrition, a little bit maybe about movement and exercise, and I'm super excited to get into your third week, which is the mindset and emotional mastery, which I think is so key. So let's dive into it, Marta. What got you on your health journey?
Yeah. So like Zach mentioned, I'm local from this area in Connecticut. I grew up in Stonington, and I won't go back too far, give my whole life story, but I always thought of myself as a pretty healthy person. I played sports growing up and always was kind of preached to about eating well and exercising and all of that. And I didn't play sports in college, but kind of definitely continued, was always a super active person. I was a runner for a long time. And it wasn't really until I turned 30 in 2019 when I really realized how much I was just completely ignoring my mental and emotional health. And that's just not something that was emphasized or encouraged to me growing up. And I was pretty much just running myself ragged, trying to do all the things to do be what I thought was healthy, and doing whatever was taught to me. And I felt like I was living my life on autopilot. I didn't really feel like I was making decisions that felt aligned with my true self. I was kind of jumping from job to job. I've went to school for marketing, worked in marketing for my whole career. And I never really stayed at any job longer than about 2 years. That was kind of my point in time when I just got bored, was like, okay, what's next? I need to look for happiness and fulfillment in the next external thing, the next thing. Same thing with relationships. Around the 1 or 2 year mark, I was like, okay, I'm bored of this. What's next? And I found myself in that pattern for over 10 years, basically that period of my life in my 20s. And so going back to 2019, when I was turning 30, I was in what I felt like was a pretty good relationship actually at that time, and had just gotten a new job at a fully remote marketing agency that I was really excited about, because I was excited to finally live my dream of being a digital nomad and traveling the world, working remotely. So I was getting all prepared to do that in like January of 2020. And of course, none of that panned out at all. A lot of canceled plans that year. I ended up moving back into my parents' house in Connecticut. So it was like a lot of life changes. I know everybody went through like a lot of major life changes and even traumas throughout that year. So I ended, that relationship ended. I had started this new job, but I moved away from my whole community of friends and didn't have my gym anymore, which was a big part of my community, and just felt for the first time, like really let myself feel that feeling of loneliness and heartbreak, and just like leaned all the way into it in a way that I had always just been really good at distracting myself from doing before. Yeah. So I definitely let myself wallow, if you will, for a while during that time. And finally, luckily, had kind of a wake-up call where I just realized, like, I need to take this into my own hands. Like, no one else is going to come save me. No one is going to do this for me. If I want to feel happy and healthy, that's my responsibility. So I basically just started taking some like very small baby steps, because that's all that I could really manage to do at the time, was like one thing at a time. And the first thing was going to therapy, which I'm a huge proponent of therapy. I had never done that before. I always kind of felt in the back of my mind like, I feel like I should maybe go to therapy, but I never actually like looked into it, or, checked if my health insurance would cover it, or took any of the actual steps to do it. So I finally did. And I feel like that was really a huge catalyst of my kind of self-awareness, self-growth journey. And I still work with the same therapist virtually today, and she's incredible and I love her. So, so I started going to therapy, and then I started just doing all the little things that I always said I wanted to do, but again, never did, or procrastinated doing. So I started actually prioritizing my sleep, which might sound like, okay, no big deal, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, that is like, I feel the number one key thing that's missing for so many people is getting high quality sleep and rest. Yeah. So that was one thing. And I'll say that's still like a work in progress for me, but I prioritize it even more now than even 4 years ago. So I started doing that. I started actually meditating every day, and actually like having a consistent yoga practice, and just things that were more calming and restorative for my nervous system, versus expending so much energy every day doing really intense workouts and running and taking care of everyone else around me, and running from one thing to the next, stressful jobs, workout, going out, drinking, happy hour. Like, I filled every minute of my day. And I'm also such a planner that I would have weekends planned out months in advance, just to ensure that I was like never alone. Like, I avoided being alone like the plague. And so through like traditional psycho talk therapy, I learned all of that about myself. I didn't ever realize that. And, of course, tying it back to things from my childhood and growing up and my parents and siblings and all of that. But so during that year is when I felt for the first time that I was really like taking my health back into my own hands, and learning also that your health is really not just being active and exercising and eating well. There's so much more to it. And I know you guys have like your 4 pillars of wellness, and I've kind of come up with my own pillars, but I think the main idea is that we could be eating a perfect diet. We could be exercising every day And that doesn't mean necessarily that you're a healthy person.
Absolutely.
So I eventually heard through friends of friends about IIN, the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, where it's an online certification it's an online certification class to become a health coach. And I had never even heard of health coaching before. I have had various coaches in my life, mostly for sports, and I've heard of life coaches and always honestly kind of thought that was like a scam. And I think that's still, unfortunately, a kind of misconception about life coaching today.
Totally.
But once I learned more about this program that was focused on holistic health, it really opened my eyes to kind of a potential different pathway that my life could go. I was like, I could continue just working in marketing and, move up the ladder in my career, maybe be a director or something. But I always realized I don't really want my boss's job. When she leaves, I don't want that job. It seems really stressful. And I was already stressed enough. So I knew I didn't want to keep doing that. I just didn't know what else to do. I was like, this is what I went to school for. This is what I know. I don't know how to do anything else. I've never done anything else. And I've always been very independent and didn't want to have to rely on anybody else, which is another thing I'm working on. But yeah, I did. So I never saw another way out of the corporate world of work until I did this program. And I did it while I was still working full time, but it was, part-time online and nights and weekends and things. And then I just started coaching people, friends and family. And so I finished the program in 2022. And as I remember very vividly, the very first person who I had a one-on-one coaching session with, and it was just to practice. After that hour was up, I was like, oh my God, people could pay me to do this. And I could make a living doing this. And I love it. And I for the first time ever in my life was this is what people mean about if you love your job, you don't work a day in your life. And it's not to say that it's not a lot of work still. It still is hard. But yeah, so I've been coaching people for the last couple of years and eventually was able to transition away from working full-time in marketing. I still do some part-time marketing work, but mostly I'm just focused now on growing my business. And I moved back to Connecticut. I've lived many places, but most recently I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina for a couple of years. That's actually where I started my coaching business. And it was kind of the culmination of a lot of things at the end of last year, the end of 2023, I had this kind of revelation that now was the time for me to walk away from this job. I had actually stayed there for 4 years. So that was a record for me. I felt like I made my mark. I was done with that. And it honestly was an amazing experience and still was the best marketing job that I had by far. But I knew that if I stayed doing that, I wouldn't get to my full potential of being able to grow and learn and give through my coaching business. So I left that job at the end of last year. I ended in yet another relationship and did some traveling. I did a trip to Brazil, which I had been wanting to do for basically since 2020, been putting that off. So I finally did it. And then, came back to Connecticut and met Zach, and here we are.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Thanks so much for sharing. There's quite a few things there that stood out and really, drew parallel to my personal awakening journey. And the first thing that stood out was you used the word autopilot. I think that's a big one. When I think about an awakening process, I definitely explain it as going from that autopilot, that unconscious, to a more conscious state of being. We got into this a little bit in one of the past podcasts talking about consciously versus unconsciously creating your reality. So it sounds like, there's more of that autopilot and unconsciously creating a reality around yourself that you eventually came to terms with wasn't in full alignment with yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of people can really relate to that. And I think when we think about the 4 pillars of wellness and what it really means to be healthy, it's really, meeting your potential, being in alignment. And when we're unconsciously creating our surroundings and our experience, it's hard to be healthy. I really feel like that's very relatable for a lot of people right now. There's a lot of people that'll be watching this podcast that want something different and just don't know where to begin. And I think it's so important to understand the clarity that comes from starting to make those small changes to health. You mentioned, diet, exercise as like those 2 big teachers where it was like, these are the things, and if you do this, you're healthy. And then you realize that there's so much more to that. So in your first week of your summer wellness reset, you're going over diet and nutrition. So let's kind of delve into that a little bit. I'm sure if you're anything like myself, you've gone down a lot of rabbit holes with diets and tried a whole lot of different things. Where are you at today regarding optimal diet and nutrition?
Yes, I have certainly gone down a lot of rabbit holes. So today, present day Marta, I'm much less rigid with myself than I have been in the past as far as my diet and what I eat. And that's what I try to also guide clients through. Although my coaching programs don't really focus super heavily on diet. Like, I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a nutritionist. I have a lot of that knowledge and I'm personally just like very passionate about it, but I'm not like writing diet plans for people by any means. You can see someone else to do that. But I basically believe in more of an intuitive eating approach and not restricting or depriving yourself, because that's typically going to lead to an unhealthy relationship with food anyways. And when I say intuitive eating, I want to just point out also that approach really only works if you have a basic education and understanding of nutrition, at which the majority of the population, at least in the U.S., does not have. Sadly, it's just not taught. It's not something that we're taught growing up, unless you seek that out on your own. Maybe you were fortunate to have parents or caregivers who were like doctors or nutritionists, but even in that case, they're like in a 4-year medical school program today, like they're taking 1 semester of nutrition, 1 semester, 1 class. Mm-hmm. So it's barely scratching the surface. And it's also just a field that is ever changing, the science. So I think, messing up the mic setup. So it's always changing, and there's so much information out there. So I know from the people I speak to, it's just very overwhelming to try to figure out like what you should actually be eating. Yeah. And let alone what works for you and your body and whatever you're going through like at the time, but also maybe you have sensitivities, maybe you have allergies that you're not sure of, or other chronic health issues. And like, yes, it's great to eat clean, eat whole foods, eat organic and all of that. But the majority of the population they're not even there. Yeah. Like, so it's like most people are just eating fast food every day, if we're really honest. Like, maybe not in our circles, but that is just the reality of the US these days. So I think I try to just have balanced approach of like, of course, I'm encouraging people to like helping them with like what things are generally healthy to eat and what to try to avoid. But with the understanding and the kind of context that might not be accessible to everyone, and that might not be realistic or affordable or whatever the barriers are. There's so many different barriers. There's also like cultural considerations to take into consideration when working with other people. So I just think diet is such an individual thing, and just because something works for me or you does not mean that it's going to help heal the rest of the planet.
Absolutely.
Like, it's so personal. So I try to always just be mindful of that when whether I'm like sharing on social media or working one-on-one with someone in person. It's not ever going to be me telling you what you should be eating.
Yeah.
I think that's super important.
Absolutely. Some of the mistakes that I feel like people fall into when they I say mistakes, but I feel bad because a lot of people are well-intentioned. They go 30, 40, 50, 60 years of being completely unconscious with their consumption when it comes to food. And then they have that switch and they want to make a change, and then very often get misled into, fad diets or, these quick fixes, even just like going to the store and getting, oh, this says sugar free. Oh, this says fat free, without having even that deeper understanding of what's replacing the sugar.
Right.
What does it mean when something is fat free? How processed does that become? What else? There really is so much to it. And this is a topic we can go the entire podcast with, but I think we very much align in the facts of, there is no one size fits all. I think that eating a whole food, what people would consider a vegan diet, is incredible for so many people. Just like I believe that people who feel best on a carnivore diet, eating solely meat and meat organ, can help heal so many people. And I also, there's a saying that I always go to, and I want to hear your opinion on it. What's better for you, a sad salad or a happy donut?
Yes.
And this I think will kind of transition into some of the mindset stuff, which I think is so important. Early on in my health journey, it was nutrition, it was movement, it was meditation, it was yoga, it was daily exercise, starting to be more mindful of my consumption. But I was not taking into consideration the mindset and my thoughts and my beliefs. Yeah. So going back to that sad salad versus a happy donut, it sounds ridiculous, and it kind of is. But if you are miserable every day, you're restricting your diet and eating salads and restricting your calories, and you are miserable and resentful of this, that is going to have a different impact, a more negative impact on your physiology than if you were happy eating those salads every day. It's same thing with a donut. If you have a donut and you're happy about it, you feel you earned it, versus having that donut and hiding it and feeling guilt and feeling shame, that donut is quite literally going to impact your physiology in a much different way. And that's to the depth of how powerful our beliefs are about things. So if you're eating a certain diet, eating certain foods because you've been told to, or you think it's what's best for you, but you don't feel that way, that's going to be much different than really eating foods that are healthy for you, but that you also enjoy. Like, this has to be, I think the biggest thing I'm trying to get around to is it has to be a sustainable lifestyle, and you have to be happy with what you're doing. Yeah. Like, for me, I love eating burgers. You're not going to catch me across the street at McDonald's eating a burger, but you're going to catch me at the Tin Peddler in Stonington eating a local grass-fed organic burger, likely once a week, maybe every other week, because it brings me joy and I love it. But I try to be as mindful of my sourcing of that meat as possible. So obviously I believe your third week of your reset is mindset and emotional mastery. So what will you kind of get into when you're talking about mindset?
Yeah. First, I'm going to comment on the sad salad and the happy donut.
Please, yeah, please do. I think that was the original question.
So I cannot agree more. It's not only what you're eating, but how you're eating it. Like, physically, what are you doing while eating? Are you driving in your car, like running, stressing out because you're late and you're like grabbing something and going through the fast through lane. That's not like, think about that environment that you're creating for your body to digest and absorb your food. That's not a good environment that you're making for your body. Versus, are you sitting down in a chair at a table, maybe with someone, with friends or family, in a more like friendly, relaxed environment, and not watching TV or being on your phone and being on screens and distracting yourself from what's actually in front of you and the task at hand, which is eating your food, chewing and eating and swallowing. So I think how you eat is just as important as what you're actually eating. And then also the feeling that it gives you. Like, that's what I help a lot of my clients with, is like, I sometimes will help people do like a food diary just for a few days to help get a better sense of like what their typical diet is like when we're starting out. And so what I ask them to track not just what they're eating and where and the times, but how did it make you feel when you're eating that? And it's, it could be like emotionally, how did you feel? Did you feel guilty about it? Did you feel happy? Did you enjoy it? And then also physically, of course, like, did it give you a stomach ache or did you have a headache after? That's important too, because food is going to impact like our energy or mood, all of that. So yeah, I love that. The sad salad. And don't ever settle for a sad salad.
No.
Like, I love salads. I eat salads most days, actually. But they're not, I try to avoid them being sad salads. Like, I make that joke a lot, though. Like, when I used to work in an office and I would be rushing and not have time to bring lunch or something, and I would go down to the cafeteria and get a salad, and I'd be like, guys, I'm having this sad salad today for lunch. And like, I know it's not going to be satisfying. And then I'm going to probably need to go and get like a cookie after to like satisfy my cravings. Yep. But whereas if I had a salad that was actually like substantial and had like all the different things in it, different flavors, different textures, different colors, then I would feel a lot more satisfied.
Absolutely.
And I wouldn't need the cookie.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. So anyways, back to the mindset piece.
Yeah.
So yeah, in the reset program that I do, and I do these seasonally. So I did one in the fall, and then I'm doing this one in June, and I'll probably do another one later in the year. But I just think there's such a nice way to like either kickstart something, or if you felt like you've really like been off track, like a lot of people, it's like, I don't do them around the new year because I feel like you already have enough external pressure to reset yourself or in January. But come May or June, probably all those things, the goals that you set for yourself are probably long gone out the window. So we do focus on diet. We do focus on movement and exercise, and those are foundational pieces of your health. But the third component that I added in, and what I work with a lot of one-on-one clients on, is mastering your mindset and your emotional health, mental health, emotional health. And it's, again, we're not going to transform your mental health in 1 week. I'm not claiming that, but I do provide people with the tools and different practices to try and see what works for you. So for me, I think the main thing is, how can we be more mindful, meaning more present in like moment to moment for more of your day than not.
Yeah. And
I don't even think that's something that like most people think about, let alone are intentionally doing. And that's what it's all about, is like being more intentional. Yeah. So that doesn't come naturally for most people, not for me, for anyone. It is a practice. And so the way that we can practice being more mindful and present is through a meditation practice. And meditation is really, I like to think of it and explain it as just a way to practice mindfulness. It's a way to train your brain to focus on one thing at a time, to single task instead of multitask, which is what we're doing most of the rest of our day. And so it's like anything else. The more you practice it, the better you're going to be at it. And it doesn't mean that you have to spend hours a day meditating. Even just 5 or 10 minutes is a great way to start. And there are plenty of studies saying that even just 5 or 10 minutes a day can like vastly improve so many different things, from your physical well-being, to having more like mental clarity and focus, like being able to actually focus, having better energy, being able to not be so reactive in your life and be able to pause and respond in a way that you actually want to respond to stressful situations.
So good. So good.
Start of it.
you touched on, a couple big things there. I want to quickly go back to what you said, because it really struck me. And this is something that I'm really working on. My diet overall is pretty good. I eat mostly organic, local source foods. I enjoy myself while I'm eating. But one thing is I chow my food down so damn fast. Yeah. It's gone. It's gone like that. And it's like, and then there's a lot of times where even like, I'll be watching a podcast or something highly activating, highly stimulating. I'm rushing or I'm rushing and just chowing down. And I notice the food goes right through me in moments like that. And I'm like, this is a good, healthy meal. Yeah. And it's going straight through me because I was in that fight or flight response, whether I was rushing, chowing down a meal in between clients or eating while I'm angry, looking at some news article or some podcast that's highly activating. So thank you so much for touching on that. I think that is super, super important. And then jumping forward to when you were talking about meditation, if you're, I'm sure you hear it too from clients. I get a lot of resistance around meditation because what I hear immediately is, I've tried it. I'm not good at it. My mind doesn't stop. And what I try
I don't have time.
Or I don't have time.
That's my favorite.
Which is perfect because we're talking 3-5 minutes. Let's check your screen time and see how much time you have. The big thing I tell people when it comes to meditation is it's a practice, like Marta said. It's a practice. It's not about having a quiet mind. It's about sitting with your awareness, noticing when you get stuck in a thought form, whether it's a worry about yesterday or something you're worried about for tomorrow, and noticing when you're stuck in that thought form and coming back to the breath, coming back to the heart, or wherever area of focus is for your meditation. There are days I'll meditate for 10 minutes and I am literally in tomorrow's worries the entire time. Right? I know you can relate to that.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been meditating for 4 or 5 years now. So it's normal for you to have those moments of being totally distracted while you're meditating. But it's a win every time you catch yourself and guide your awareness back to center, back to the breath. That is allowing, like you said, it's giving you that opportunity in your regular life when you have that stimulus, that trigger, and you are able to create that pause between the stimulus, the trigger, and the response, because if you're anything like me, I came from a highly activated family. We yell, we scream, we say things we don't mean, and then we pretend like it doesn't happen. And the biggest thing that I'm working on is emotional mastery and really being able to pause when I'm triggered so I don't react on autopilot, lash out, externalize my stress onto people I love. And meditation has been the greatest practice for that, where I can actually pause, have some awareness, pause, and respond in a way that makes me feel better and keeps the people around me,
Yes.
I think that's huge. So let's jump right into a little bit about the emotional mastery, how much that has played into your personal journey and kind of how you go about helping clients with that.
Yeah. So what you said about meditation, helping to like calm yourself so that you're in a better state and frame of mind to then respond how you want to and how you're choosing to, versus just being on autopilot and blurting out the first thing that comes to your mind, which is not always the most helpful thing to say in the moment. It can definitely help with that. And I feel like I come from like the opposite background where it was always like, there's no yelling, there's no confrontation, there's no conflict, that nothing is like, everything is fine. And that was all just kind of swept under the rug. And so I have always had a really hard time with confrontation and conflict, and seeing like witnessing people express anger is like terrifying to me. Not so much anymore, but it was. And I was always like a very quiet, child growing up, super shy, introverted. And I think, so for me, like having a meditation practice now is almost like a way for me to, this sounds kind of counterintuitive, but like a way for me to get out of my head, because I've always been so in my head.
Yeah.
And I'm so like, I'm not the one that's like, was like a yelling, screaming, crazy little kid, but I was like over analyzing every little detail in my mind all day long.
Internalizing all the
Yes.
stress versus externalizing it.
Yeah. So I think meditation is great for both. So whatever, or if you had like even a third different alternative experience in your childhood. But for me, it's more about, and I'm still like definitely a overthinker. And so I love my whole, I mean, we could talk about like morning ritual. That's my other favorite topic, but, I love that peace and quiet that I create for myself intentionally every morning to just kind of like zone out. And it took me a while to be able to do that. And I can't do it every single day perfectly by any means. Like a lot of times I am just like thinking of like, okay, what's the next thing I have to do after this? What that thing that happened yesterday? Oh my God, I can't believe I said that. That happens. But the point, like Zach was saying, the whole point of meditation is to just acknowledge when you notice you have those thoughts, and there are different practices for doing that. And then being able to come back to your breath or whatever like other sensation you want to be able to focus on. Your breath is like the most common one, I would say, to keep you giving your mind like something to focus on, but it's not anything that's going to like distract you or make you be like in distress at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, that meditation has really helped me personally with my overactive mind. And it's also helpful for like, if you have any issues with sleeping, it can be super helpful to help you fall asleep or just help your body like wind down. Yeah. So I'm huge on like having morning and nighttime routines, and that's a big part of my coaching, but we also fit it into this 3-week program. We fit a lot in. So the emotional mastery piece, I would say, is more what we focus on is we take a little, what I say, like a look under the hood at some of the beliefs that you might have developed over the years, consciously or unconsciously, just from your experience growing up, of what it means to be healthy. And there's all kinds of different opinions on what being healthy is, right? Like we were talking about it before. There's so much information out there, and it's also constantly changing. I think for women in particular, who are like anywhere around my age range, there's so much societal, like external pressure on us to be doing all the things to be healthy. And if you're not like eating a super clean, whatever, raw, vegan, organic diet, and you're not going to 4 Pilates classes every week, and but also like having a good job and building a perfect relationship and family and raising your kids and going on vacation and keeping up with all the Joneses and also having time to like relax and take care of yourself. It's impossible, like really, to do all of that at once without having some kind of support system. And so between that and then, like I said, just being constantly bombarded with different wellness industry trends and fads and information, it's kind of the perfect storm to, like, it's no wonder that we are all just like utterly confused and lost about what being healthy actually looks like and feels like for us personally, individually. And so we do some of that work where I big on like journaling prompts and journaling, and that's a big component of it too. But look at where your beliefs around being healthy came from as a child. Maybe it was your caregivers, your parents, teachers at school. So sorry, but you probably didn't learn that much in your middle school health class. Like, I really couldn't even tell you what we learned. And like, that's about it. That's the standard education that we're kind of given. And modeled. So, again, it's no wonder that no one really knows what is good for them or not.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't really get much easier, unfortunately, once we become adults, because we have Google and the internet and social media at our fingertips. And it's not just our peers who we are comparing ourselves to or getting advice from. It's random strangers and celebrities and people who are not qualified to give advice. And it's not that there's no like well-intentioned people out there. Like there's plenty of good, really like solid health information too. It's just getting harder and harder to like filter that out.
Absolutely.
It's like, it's really difficult even for me and like people in this industry to do. So, I think part of it is like, we need to give ourselves some grace and compassion because, and I use this like analogy sometimes where if you were traveling to another foreign country and you didn't know the language, would you beat yourself up for not being able to communicate with the local people there? Like if you're going to France and you never learned French, you're not going to be like, oh God, I'm such a failure because I can't speak French perfectly to this French person. So why do we do that to ourselves around what to eat or what exercise works or what we should be doing with our health? Like we weren't taught this information. Yeah. So now as like resourced adults, which I'm assuming you are if you're watching this podcast, you do have the choice to try something and see if it works for you and choose to like do your own research and, do some self-experimentation. Yeah. And I think that can be really empowering for people.
Yeah. And I think it's good to normalize that. Like looking back on my journey, you looking back on your journey, I think it's almost healthy to have fallen into some of these pitfalls. Like I look back on my days of being like hardcore rigid vegan or, beating myself up when I ate certain foods. Like it's normal to go through that process. The process of the awakening journey for me, especially, I'm a Libra. So for me, it's all about balance and I struggle with addiction. So I'm an extremist in every way of life. So I tend to go into things hardcore, fall on my face, realize, okay, now I'm hardcore into the movement, but I'm working out 9 days a week and I'm not even sleeping at night. So it's all about falling into these pitfalls, beating yourself up a little bit, which then allows you, hopefully, if it's the healthy amount of beating yourself up, is finding yourself back into some balance. And I think that's the key to all of it. I wanted to touch on, like you had said, growing up in a family where, there wasn't much arguing, there wasn't much confrontation. With all the men's work that I do, this seems to be the two ends of the spectrum. Yeah. Is growing up in a household like mine where there was a lot of lashing out. There was a lot of that externalizing your emotional state. So for instance, for me, if I'm triggered, if somebody triggers me with something that strikes my I'm not good enough or I'm not a good boy, I've had a hard time in the past sitting with that. And based on how it was modeled in my childhood, what do? Is I externalize that stress state onto the person in front of me, which is very often my girlfriend, my mom, my sisters in the past, people I care about the most, and that's how my family dealt with things. We're stressed. I'm not taking the blame for this. I can't possibly be the reason for this. So I'm going to externalize it and make you the scapegoat and make you the problem through lashing out with my tongue. And you came from the opposite end of the spectrum, which is what with a lot of the men that I work with seems to be the other end of like, yeah, my parents never argued. But what I've found with people with that is they struggle to be in some of those more, they struggle with the anger, which can be a very healthy emotion. For me, I've come to realize anger shows me where I'm lacking boundaries. So if I'm not able to, there's a healthy amount of anger, I definitely tend to overly express it and you're on the other end of that spectrum. But I'm always so fascinated with that, because one of my best friends told me that he never heard his parents argue. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds like heaven.
Right. And I'm sure it does for someone who came from like your background. But like my parents still got divorced when I was 10. So it's not like there wasn't issues.
Yeah.
And like I had a wonderful childhood, and I know you've shared your whole story on this podcast. And like I still have a very close relationship with my parents, and my mom remarried, and I've had my stepdad for like almost 20 years who also helped raise me. And like it just wasn't something that I felt kind of blindsided by it, to be honest. And that whole that is something that I'm very much still like in the middle of processing, I think, right now, of just that experience of my childhood and how I completely ignored the fact that it could have possibly had any impact on me throughout my like teens and 20s. I was like, oh no, I'm fine. Like I was so young when that happened, and my mom remarried and I have a great life, and my stepdad came in and was like the savior, and I'm fine. And that was always kind of how I dealt with it. And again, it wasn't until I like started going to therapy and uncovered that, just some of the things of what it means when your parent physically leaves when you were young.
Yeah.
And having that abandonment wound and all of that. So not sure where we're going with that, but
yeah, no, that's powerful though, because that's an although and like things, that happening, like on one hand, you were fine and that was okay, and then there's the other, it's all about peeling the onion. And that's another big part of the awakening journey is unpeeling and unpeeling. Like this isn't, as this isn't forever unfolding process of awakening and finding optimal health. And, that's where like, that's a big thing in society. And, we were taught a little bit about diet. We were taught a little bit about movement, a little bit about the importance of rest and sleep, obviously. But emotions, emotional maturity, emotional regulation is something that was totally neglected. Being a male in society, we were always taught, stiff upper lip. Big boys don't cry, that kind of a mentality. And that tends to, breed fathers who are not as in touch with their emotions, which has an impact on their kids, whether you're overly expressing the emotions or under expressing and actually repressing those emotions. I think this is like one of my deepest passions, because this is where like my deepest work lies, I feel like right now. It seems like somewhat of you too, of like unpacking the childhood stuff and really coming to a deep understanding of my internal emotional state. I'm such a people pleaser. I have a hard time knowing my own needs and my own wants in the moment. That's a big thing that me and Cheyenne go through of like, her asking me, what do you need? What do you want? I don't know. What do you need? What do you want? It's like, no. That's a big thing though. The emotions, I think, is like, for me, it's that missing link. My diet's pretty well dialed in. My exercise, I went from being like bodybuilder and wanting everything to be about aesthetics and just looking good to now my training is fully based around function and feeling good so I can do everything I want in my life. Yeah. And the meditation, rest, and recovery is pretty well dialed in. The big thing is that emotional, that mental emotional health, which is so critical. Yeah. And we can spend forever on on this topic.
It's funny. I was just talking to my younger brother last night about kind of the same thing, and you remind me so much of him. Actually, it freaks me out sometimes. I think you guys are the same age. Like that's you would be best friends if he lived here, but he's in Australia. So, shoot. But yeah, we have to like time our phone calls very particularly. But he also struggles with people pleasing, and like he and I both. But he's kind of going through a lot right now where he's figuring out, like, he's never really taken the time to ask himself what he needs either, for himself to feel good, to feel healthy, to be in a happy, healthy relationship. And it's really hard once, like, I think to at first come to that realization of like, oh my God, I've never even asked myself these questions. But once you kind of get over that initial maybe shock period, it is such powerful work. And that's really where, like, yes, we can talk to clients about their diet and exercise all day, but once you do have those things kind of on track, and if you're still not feeling happy, fulfilled, joy in your life, like there's a whole nother level that you can get into.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a huge one. It really is. Yeah. It's, because how, and even like how much does our nutrition and our eating habits feed into our emotions? I mean, even myself, I'm not an overweight person. However, I totally emotionally eat. When I get angry, I totally reach for sugar. I totally overindulge and self-sabotage during moments of that. Yeah. And very often through numbing myself through food. Yeah. Which leads to a cascade of
other physical
misery,
No, I'm the same exact way. And like, I've never really been someone who's like struggled with my weight. And from the external, like you would probably just think like, oh, she's just some like skinny white girl or like average size girl. But I also have always been terrified of becoming fat. Yeah. Like, and I'm not going to get into like disordered eating and body dysmorphia and all that. I know that's a very sensitive subject and it's complex and is like, again, so individual and personal, but I am the same. Like, I feel like I eat pretty well. Generally, I'm not perfect. Like, I went and had tacos and a margarita last night for dinner, but like, I absolutely struggle with emotional eating. And that's not all, and again, something that I just recently like realized that's even what it was, where going back to like the loneliness, food, alcohol for a long time was always kind of my go-to numbing. Like I have never, I don't know, I've never had like super like binge periods, I guess, but it was like, I know I have these go-to like comfort foods that I would go to make me feel better. And it would only be nights where I was like fully alone. If I was with someone, with friends, with family, with a partner, it's not even on my mind. And so like how amazing that your brain can just trigger a craving just because of like the physical situation that you're in.
Absolutely.
And so one thing, like I talk a lot about cravings, especially with sugar related with clients, and like, it's another thing that's just interesting to track about yourself. Like looking at a given week, when you felt a craving, like where were you? What time of day was it? Was there anyone with you? And like, what specifically was it that you're craving? And that can give you a lot of good information.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you mentioned that earlier too with, cause I also use a lot of my clients, I have them start with some food journaling as well. I'm embarrassed to admit, I never even thought about like the feeling side of it and all of that. It was more of like, let's track what you're eating so we could start to make some changes, but not going into like, when did you eat, when and where were you when you ate that? How did it make you feel emotionally? Like that's something I'm definitely going to take from this and incorporate that into the food journaling. Cause I think that is such a big proponent, for me, if there's ice cream in the fridge and it's very often that, it's being binged on and really being, mindful. I'm even going to start to add that into my own food journaling of like really being mindful of how I'm feeling when I reach for certain things. I think that would bring a much deeper insight into my internal world. So thank you so much for that. I think we've about touched on all the things. I mean, I know we could go forever and ever. Definitely very like-minded, and I've really enjoyed having you on.
Yeah.
Before we take off, I want to give you your little plug here. What obviously we talked about your course. When does it start? How can people find you? How can they work with you?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this has been a great combo. So I'm mostly on Instagram these days. On social media, it's just at Wellness with Marta. There's some underscores in there, but if you just search Wellness with Marta, you'll find me. And the Summer Wellness Reset Program, that is kicking off in about 2 weeks, June 3rd. And it is partially a course, but it's mostly like we're going through it together. I'm doing it right alongside with you. I did it also in the fall. Like we mentioned, it's focusing on one core area each week. So the first week will be your diet and nutrition. I'll give you some guidelines. It's not anything like super restrictive or strict, but it's more, here are things to like focus on and to try adding in for yourself, and you see what works. And then if it's up to you if you choose to carry that through the rest of the program and even beyond the program. The second week is focusing on movement and exercise. And again, it's kind of just basic things. You don't need any special like supplements or vitamins. You don't have to buy any special fancy equipment or anything. Everything can just be done at home or whatever gym you already go to. And then the third week is the mindset and emotional mastery week, where we get into a lot of the practices we were just talking about. You also will get like a couple of live coaching calls with me and the group, as well as like a one-on-one consultation with me. So it was really amazing when I did it in the fall, and I'm really looking forward to it. If you're someone who's just feeling like you need a little bit of like a boost or a kick in the butt to get started, this is a great time to do that going into the summer. And you can find all the information about that on my Instagram. There are different links. And I'll mention one other thing. If you are local in this area, I am doing a breathwork and mindfulness class alongside a sound bath in June. And that will be in Westerly, Rhode Island, and with a lovely woman who is a massage therapist, my massage therapist, who's amazing, and also a Reiki healer. So she'll bring her sound bowls. It's like a lovely, relaxing Saturday afternoon. So we'd love to have you there. That's on June 15th.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll work out a little something on the side. I figured for anybody listening, if you're interested in doing the reset with Marta, if you reach out to me, we'll work out a little something so our listeners can potentially get a little discount on the course and get people in there. And she's a wealth of knowledge, truly embodies health and all the things that she preaches, which I think is the thing that I'm looking for the most with any teachers and coaches that I'm working with is the embodiment aspects. And you absolutely embody everything health. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and always remember,